Here, we'll talk about
This
the Russian capture of Avdiivka now.
is what remains of the eastern Ukrainian town of Avdiivka after months of grinding combat. Ukraine's top military commander ordered troops to pull out of the besieged town on Saturday, giving Russia its most significant battlefield victory since taking Bakhmut in May 2023. It shows how Russian forces may be regaining the initiative in Ukraine, as Kyiv grapples with critical shortages of weapons and soldiers. Here's what the fall of Avdiivka means for both sides of the war and Ukraine's Western backers. Ukrainian commanders said they were outnumbered and outgunned by Russian forces. The new army chief, Oleksandr Syrsky, pulled back troops to preserve lives and prevent being encircled.
Військовий звільняє території, захищає домівки, захищає людей, сім'ї, і тому рішення правильне, щоб не попасти в оточення.
Russia renewed efforts to take Avdiivka after Ukraine's counter-offensive failed last year. In doing so, Moscow took heavy losses of men and equipment. Ukraine believes that almost 50,000 Russian...
The clips they're showing are from the 3rd Assault Brigade, which are Azov veterans, by the way. You can see their emblem be a dog whistle for Wolf's Angel.
Soldiers died, and hundreds of vehicles were destroyed. Despite this, capturing Avdiivka is key to Russia's aim of securing control of the eastern Donbass region. Military analysts say this will allow Moscow to develop Donetsk as a major logistics hub.
So it's about 12 miles from Donetsk city. It's on the high ground. So it's a good place to launch attacks towards Donetsk from. And so Russia has been, for years, trying to retake it to create a little more of a buffer zone around Donetsk city.
It also hands Russian President Vladimir Putin a battlefield victory as he seeks re-election in March, especially as neither side had made a significant breakthrough in well over a year.
Joel Siveru, thank you for the 10 gifted
For Ukraine,
subs.
losing Avdiivka is a blow to troop morale. And it's happening as Ukraine runs critically low on ammunition and manpower. Soldiers said they sometimes have to save ammunition and hold fire, even when Russian soldiers are in their sights. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said the lack of shells is partly to blame for the situation in Avdiivka.
Russia's sending wave after wave of conscript forces to attack Ukrainian positions, and because Congress has yet to pass the supplemental bill, we've not been able to provide Ukraine with the artillery shells that they desperately need to disrupt these Russian assaults.
Last week, the Democrat-controlled Senate passed an aid package with about $60 billion related to Ukraine. But now the bill faces hurdles in the Republican-run House because of the influence of former President Donald Trump, who opposes more Ukraine aid. Ukraine's president said he's prepared to show Trump what's happening in his country.
And if Mr. Trump, if he will come, I'm ready even to go with him to the front line.
Military analysts don't believe taking Avdiivka will decisively tip the war in Russia's favor.
It's not a major crossroads, which are very important. There's not a major rail line, which Russia uses to move supplies. So it really would just be a symbolic victory.
Russian gains show the enormous challenge Ukraine faces.
Bro, Zelensky, please take him to the front line, dog. Oh my God. That would be so sick. Dude. That would be so fucking sick. Oh my God, please. Please. Dude, listen. Pootie Poo has the capacity to do the funniest thing. I mean, it would never in a million years happen. But all I'm saying is there is some really cool stuff that could happen in this hypothetical journey where this would never really happen, obviously, but like if it did, it would be fucking incredible.
If US and European support wavers. President Biden said he told Zelensky he's confident that Congress will ultimately approve additional funding for Ukraine.
The Ukrainian people have fought so bravely and heroically. They put so much on the line. And the idea that now
It'd be the end of the world, though? No, it wouldn't. What the fuck are you talking about? It would not. It would literally save the Republican Party more than the Democratic Party. Let's be for really real here. Are you kidding me? Trump gets martyred, seen as a hero for the rest of time. The Republicans can literally get like an actual candidate. I'm simply looking at it from the perspective of content and fun. Okay. What is this person saying?
Now, when they're running out of ammunition, we walk away. I find it absurd. I find it unethical. I find it just contrary to everything we are as a country. So I'm going to fight till we get them to.
Wait, I want to watch this too.
Ukraine is having a problem with money. And additional funding from the U.S. has stalled, which means the war-torn country could run into trouble within months.
Ukraine needs broad spectrum of aid, military support continuously.
I have
There's
to
been
pee.
a wide range of military assistance that's been provided to Ukraine, things ranging from vehicles, missiles, air defense systems.
Here's where U.S. aid to Ukraine has gone so far, and what could happen if additional funding remains stalled. Since 2022, Congress has directed more than $113 billion in aid in 4 packages to Ukraine.
Aid to Ukraine is a misnomer. The phrase implies that all of the money is going to Ukraine, but in fact about 60% of it is spent in the United States.
More than half of the appropriated aid is allocated for U.S. military operations and weapons contracts, including U.S. military equipment to replace what was sent to Ukraine, weapons contracts and services, and additional U.S. forces in Europe to support NATO. The non-defense spending includes humanitarian assistance to help the more than 6 million Ukrainian refugees and relieve global economic disruption, economic support for Ukraine's government to make up for lost revenue from the war, and war-related funding for other U.S. government agencies.
The United States has provided $60 billion of military aid when you consider all the different elements of it.
On that long list of equipment, there have been a range of weapons, including Javelin anti-armor systems, which are smaller arms designed to hit and destroy heavily armored military vehicles.
Javelin is a top-of-the-line anti-tank weapon and costs about $200,000 when you include the launcher unit.
Long-range rocket launchers, also known as HIMARS.
They cost about $7 million per launcher.
The M1 Abrams tank.
The M1 tanks cost about $14 million apiece to replace.
And the Patriot air defense system.
The United States provided one battery, which costs about $400 million. So because of the cost, they can only be used against high-end threats. It makes no point to shoot a $4 million missile at a $20,000 drone.
When we do oversight, we try to identify the areas where we can have the maximum impact. One very big line of effort, if you will, looks at the equipment, really starting throughout its life cycle, from when it's first sourced to make sure there's accountability once it goes into the country.
According to a Defense Department report released in January, as of June 2023, $1 billion worth of sensitive equipment shipped to Ukraine remained delinquent or not properly tracked in accordance with the strict requirements for tracking certain military items.
Our report shows they're making progress, but they're not meeting any of them fully. At a higher level of delinquency correlates with a higher level of risk that something bad could happen, right? And so that's why these requirements exist.
The big concern is that U.S. weapons could end up in the wrong hands.
Based on our completed work, we have not substantiated any instances of diversion of the equipment that's been provided to Ukraine.
From the onset of the war, Congress has embraced Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's resiliency against Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Ukraine didn't fall. Ukraine is alive and kicking.
But by 2023, Ukraine's efforts to repel Russian forces failed to make significant progress. This coincided with a political shift in the U.S. House of Representatives from Democratic to Republican control.
You have Republicans in charge of the House, and of course, Republicans, that segment of the country is the exact area where support for Ukraine is starting to erode.
As aid in Ukraine looks to run out, President Zelensky has met with lawmakers in Washington to lobby for more funding.
Just raw dogging liberals propaganda over at the HasanAbi broadcast? Brother, the reason why I'm not even adding any additional commentary here is because, like, this being the supposedly, like, pro-Ukraine propaganda in this circumstance fails to meet what is necessary for this to be positive. If you watch this and you think, oh man, the situation looks fucking great, actually, I don't know what to tell you. This shows what the situation, how fucked the situation is. If you have, like, even a fraction of a synapse firing in your brain and looking at the situation, you're going to be like, well, this is really fucked up, it seems. I keep telling people that America is involved in Ukraine, which is a just cause of emancipation, for the wrong reasons. Okay? It's just great marketing. We have to do this. We have to continue. We have to continue fighting. We have to continue making Ukrainians fight. We cannot do a ceasefire. What if they take over Ukraine? You know, Estonia is next. It's just like, not even Estonia, we're next. Lithuania, not even Lithuania, we're next. America is next. Oh, if this happened under Trump, would he have sent aid at all? Yes. What do you mean? It's bipartisan, guys. This is what I'm trying to explain. Yes, Donald Trump would have sent aid to Ukraine. Donald Trump did send aid to Ukraine. So yeah, as a matter of fact, part of the reason why he was being yelled at and got impeached, at least one time, was because he was like, hey, look at all this nice aid that's coming your way. Would be a real shame if it somehow stopped if you don't give me fucking blackmail on Joe Biden. Do you guys not remember? This has nothing to do with Ukrainian emancipation at all, and everything to do with the military-industrial complex. It has everything to do with recycling older weapons, sending them, trickling in. Like I said this before. I don't know how. I'm not a military expert at all, but it does feel like even the process in which they sent over the weapons to Ukraine was slow enough that it did not ensure like immediate defenses for Ukraine and made it longer. Maybe it's a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, but it does feel legitimately like weapon shipments to Ukraine and the frequency and the types of weapons that were sent in were packaged perfectly so that it was just enough that it gave people a sense of hope in Ukraine, but also not so much that it actually legitimately, I mean, what would be the motivation for that? I don't know. What do you mean what would be the motivation for that? I've already described it. The motivation for the United States in Ukraine is not to put an end to the Russian invasion. The motivation for Ukraine is to continue the war as long as possible, because this way you get to deplete your older fucking resources, a shit ton of your older weapons, okay? And then we talk about how, oh, well, we have to revitalize our defenses. And you keep feeding the military industrial complex more money. But like I said, this is just a theory. It's just speculation. And it is a bit somewhat educated, but it's a bit tinfoil hat for sure.
Democrats have proposed a nearly $111 billion security assistance bill.
The bulk of that, more than $60 billion, is for Ukraine. There's money for Israel. There is some money for Taiwan to bolster it against China.
House Republicans have refused to pass the additional spending bill until they reach an agreement to increase security at the U.S.-Mexico border.
If President Biden wants a supplemental...
Why are Republicans blocking the funding? They're being funded by the MIC. Well, because it's a good political tool at this point, because it's a bit of a dud. It's a bit of a dead end. We have more important aid. We have more important aid for Israel right now that we need to work on. It's just like, I still think it's going to pass regardless, by the way. There's no way that it doesn't. That's crazy.
Spending bill focused on national security, it better begin by defending America's national security.
With additional funding stalled in Congress, Ukrainian troops on the front lines are adapting to smaller deliveries of military aid.
Today,
yeah, it takes a while as the vehicles must be refurbished and tested before sending. And if it's a tank, for example, it takes months to train the crews. I know. The main worry, which was constantly cited, was escalation risk. That's why they staged the packages, anti-tank weapons first, then armored vehicles, then tanks, then HIMARS, then long-range missiles, and now fighter jets. They judged the Russian response. Yes, the American reasoning is very open. They say that the reason why we didn't immediately send all of the stuff that we wanted to send always is because we were worried that Russia would retaliate against us. I think it could be a little bit more nefarious. But I also don't know if this aid would have actually helped. This aid would have, early on, would have helped Ukraine more. I suspect it would. Should we still worry about that? We do still worry about that. We worry about that in the sense that we don't do a no-fly zone over Ukraine. You know what I mean? There's not a no-fly zone over Ukraine. Ukraine is not in NATO. Ukraine is not going to be in NATO. These are all very valid reasons. Like, the very valid reasons for this is because it's considered direct involvement and would be met with a tremendous amount of Russian retaliation that would greatly escalate the conflict.
aid deliveries run about a third what they were at the height of the counteroffensive back last summer. By the end of the spring, they'll be under 10%. They never go to zero, but by the time you get to the end of the summer, Ukraine will be hard-pressed.
Yeah, earlier aid would have been much more helpful. The Russians wouldn't have been able to dig in, lay minefields, and build bunkers, which were the main reasons the counteroffensive failed. Yep.
To replace its losses and to maintain its front lines.
Since 2022, the U.S. and 27-member EU together have been responsible for about 70% of the financial aid Ukraine has received. But additional EU funding has hit its own roadblocks. The members failed to pass a $54 billion funding package in December. U.S. leaders worry that a loss of Ukraine to Russia could be a strategic defeat that poses greater security and military threats, such as an attack on one of its global allies.
If Putin attacks a NATO ally, if he keeps going, and then he attacks a NATO ally, well, we've committed as a NATO member that we defend every inch of NATO territory, then we'll have something that we don't seek and that we don't have today. American troops fighting Russian troops.
The big thing Republicans and Democrats have been happy about is that the U.S. commitment is financial only. The risk is that you get a commitment of manpower. You have American troops at risk, and that is what nobody wants to see.
Yeah. That's where we're at. Is it actual money they send or worth of the weapons and supplies? No, it's never like the only time we actually send money to Ukraine is for economic help, like economic aid in the Western Front and the West in Western Ukraine. We don't send pallets of cash to Ukraine. We send weapons. Okay? They already mentioned that too, like in the video. It's just not like people I think that we're just like airdropping. We're fucking airdropping like hell divers, like fucking pallets of cash, like parachuting it into Ukraine. What the fuck are they gonna do? Can't do shit with that. It's not how that works. It's actually lethal aid. Okay? Lethal aid.
This
Which is another way to say weapons.